Chapter 91 Changes. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Feeling some little movements near him, Astor's eyes trembled a bit before he opened them. The first thing he saw was Lilia's beautiful sleeping face right next to him. Her long black hair was perfectly spread over her naked silhouette, some parts of her body were half covered by the white bed sheets, adding more erotism to the scene his eyes were witnessing. Seeing the goddess laying next to him made Astor remember all what happened yesterday. They literally kept doing it to the point that he lost the count and only stopped when the two of them fell asleep. He had thought that after all that exercise, he would be tired the next day, but instead of that he had the most comfortable sleep of his life. In fact, his body was full of energy and it seemed like he was more aware of his surroundings. He then focused on his mother, who was sleeping with a big smiling expression which made him caress her face while thinking, seems like she is having a good dream. Lilia slowly opened her eyes and rubbed her face against her son's hand, before changing her position to sitting in front of him. "Good morning, darlin'." Astor saw his mother stopping midway before little tears formed on her eyes, and that combined with the little stains of blood on the white bed sheets that became visible now that she changed her position made him panic a bit. Mom, are you okay? Does it hurt you down there?" He was about to stood up and go get Alice to help him check on her, but Lilia threw herself at him, which made Astor fall backwards on the bed with her on top of him. Lilia hid her face on his chest without saying anything but also not allowing him to move. Astor had no other choice but wait until his mother calmed down, so he limited to caress her hair, trying his best to comfort her. After a couple of minutes, Lilia separated from him to grab her spatial ring from the nightstand next to the bed before taking out a mirror from it and placing it in front of her son. Astor got surprised by his reflect on the mirror for a moment before he let out a sigh of relief, understanding the situation. The current him on the mirror was different from yesterday. His usually light brown hair was now completely black, just like Lilia's one. Lilia smiled. "Darling, why that you are healed?" Sniff. Lilia couldn't help but cry from the happiness and relief she was feeling right now. After all this time her son finally got back what was rightfully his. Astor shook his head. "Mom, next time please tell me you are crying due to happiness. I nearly got a heart attack thinking I had hurt you." At some point Astor's memories of the past night blurred a bit, so he wasn't quite sure if he was too rough with her, so when Lilia started crying out of nowhere, he felt as if Lilia laughed, seeing his worried face and the blood stains caused by the loss of her purity. She understood why he reacted like that. She sat on his lap and softly pressed her lips against his, to enjoy the warm kiss of her lover. "My hubby is such a worrywart, but that is good. Mommy likes the feeling of you being all protective, he. She couldn't help but touch his hair as if she was confirming that her eyes were not deceiving her, but Astor stopped her from doing it. "Mom, I told you to not worry about that anymore. I'm more worried about how you feel right now. Does it hurt anywhere?" Lila had one of the brightest smiles Astor has ever seen. Sorry, it's just that I didn't think we could solve the loss of your origin blood so fast, so needed to confirm that I wasn't dreaming or something." Astor wrapped his arms around her thin waist and pressed her body against him. "I can assure you everything that happened yesterday is true, he. Lilia's eyes widened a bit, feeling her son's thing getting hard and pressing against her tummy. Darling, Mommy is a bit sensible right now, so how about you wait until tonight to continue?" Of course, Astor was just joking. Although he didn't had sex back on Earth, it was common sense to let his partner rest for some time to avoid injuries. He smiled before pushing her down on the bed to kiss her before he started sucking on her left breast. Lilia let out a low moan due to the sudden feeling of his tongue on her nipple. "Enichim, that's good, darling, drink as much as you want." Gulp. After a couple of minutes drinking Lilia's milk before they exchanged gazes and smiled at each other, Astor gave her nipple one last lick before separating from her. Lilia put on some clothes and slightly stretched her body. "You two, stop spying from outside and come in already," she said out loud. Alice and Arya entered the room while feigning ignorance of the fact that they were caught. "Good morning, how do you feel, Mom?" asked Alice, while Arya sat next to Astor to admire his now pitch-black hair. "Whoa, what happened to your hair?" Astor smiled. "Nothing, this a sign that, intimating, with Mom helped me to solve an old ill status I had due to some past complications. don't try to divert my attention. I could see you two watching me giving mom love, you know. Arya's face turned red. That was only for educational purposes. Aster saw her ashamed expression and he laughed while finding it cute. He gave Arya a kiss before standing up and dragging Alice into his embrace to kiss her too. Don't worry, I don't mind you two seeing, you will be cooperating like good sisters in the future, so it's a good way to prepare. He. Aster imagined the three of them laying on his bed ready to accept his love and he almost got hard-jut by the thought. Then he remembered that in fact Alice might be able to join them in the near future, and judging by Arya's curious expression she will probably could be convinced of the same. Alice let out a sweet sound, when she felt her father's hands fondling her ass, which made the butt plug inside of her move a bit. Don't fondle me too hard, you stupid brother, that thing is still back there. Listening to Alice's startled voice, Arya remembered what she discussed with her yesterday before they went to sleep and she felt her ass clenching a bit. Aster saw her and he let go off his sister before sitting on the bed and dragging Arya on his lap. Well, seems like my cute Arya is also interested in the same special training that Alice is undergoing. Don't worry, I already have the necessary equipment for that. In fact, we can start right now since I need to take a bath anyway. He carried Arya in his arms like a princess before standing up. Mom, you and sis also come with me. Alice was smiling from ear to ear. She approached Arya and patted her shoulder. Be careful with what you wish, you never know, it could become true. Arya covered her face with her hands before turning to see Aster. I will go too, but let me down please. Aster nodded, before gently putting her down. Alice hugged his right arm and Arya took his left arm. He turned to see Lilia, but she didn't seem to care about it. I had you alone for me all night, besides some family skinship is good to get close to each other. Aster shook his head. You succubus of a mother. They left the room while Arya was preparing for the first time. She will not also show Aster her naked body, but she will even take a bath with him. Chapter 92 Bath Time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Aster was having the best time of his life with his girls, on the main hall of the Wolfstein's castle Isaac was having a headache. Yesterday he was having some intimacy with Valentine's mother when his contact talisman started receiving a lot of messages. He unwillingly stopped what he was doing to check what was going on, and then it was when all started. The patriarch of the Rain family was demanding an explanation because it looks like his favorite son nearly got killed while visiting his Azure Sky planet. Since Isaac had no idea of what was going on, he went to the place where everything happened. Galleria. He interrogated the guards of the city and they directed him with Wieland Craft, but when he went to speak with that old man, he only got a few words from him. That stupid brat offended someone he shouldn't have. I won't say anything else because I want to keep living for a few more years. Now get out of my auction house, he said. Isaac was angry, but that old man was a hard bone to crack and he didn't want to openly fight against the Craft. Yet, after leaving he gathered information from other witnesses of the event that took place, so he was able to reconstruct the situation. Just as the administrator of the auction house said, basically the brat of the Rains messed with the wrong person and got his ass handed. The problem was that it happened in his planet, and judging by the fact that this was the first time he saw Wieland Craft afraid of someone, then the other party was probably not from this star cluster. So now the only thing they could do was pray that they didn't return to take revenge, or his Wolfstein family might get implicated in all this problem. And that was not all. Isaac spoke with Cullis Rain and they nearly got in a fight because Isaac accused his son of being a spoiled idiot. Fortunately they managed to calm down for the prosperity of their families. But now the Rain family would not approach the Azure Sky planet for a couple of years, so the Wolfstein family could wash their hands in case of possible retaliations of the unknown cultivators that even managed to scare a battle maniac like Wieland Craft. Without knowing, Aster indirectly made the Rains cut off any ties with the planet he was currently living in, which also included now injured Elder Kurt Rain leaving. The only ones who stayed were Kale and his subordinates. In fact, since he saved his older sister, his father started so see him on a different light, so when he offered himself to stay and act as the supervisor of all the assets that the Rain family had in the Azure Sky planet, his father praised him, and before ascending him to become his representative in this planet, he even allowed him to select an elder on the early stage of the stellar constellation realm as his bodyguard. Of course, Kale selected one of his supporters, so right now without anyone knowing, Aster had full control of the Rain family branch of the Azure Sky planet. As Isaac reminisced about how his 5+ years of planning almost went down the drain just because of a playboy's stupidity, he squeezed one of the edges of his throne so hard that it cracked. First that brat didn't allow me to look at Lilia, and now another brat almost screw me over just because he couldn't win a stupid sword to court a girl. Why am I so fucking unlucky lately, he thought. Little did he know that the delay of his plans with the Rains actually allowed him to live, for now. ENV. Back on Lilia's area of the castle, more specifically on the bathroom, laughs and some suggesting sounds could be heard coming from the inside. Kaya. Mom, how did you get them to be so big? It is your duty to inherit that knowledge to your only daughter, said Alice. A moment ago, Aster and the girls entered the bath, and when they undressed before using the shower spirit formation, both Alice and Arya were baffled when they saw Lilia's perfect figure. Although Alice has bathed with her mother before, she never paid attention to her naked figure until now, and she had to admit that Lilia was the perfect representation of a woman in her prime. Of course, Lilia was proud of herself in that aspect, especially because she noticed her son really liked her motherly, yet young figure, a thin waist, big hips, a succulent pair of breasts, and Aster's favorite, that juicy round ass of hers. He, you are too green to compete with me, Alice. Even when I was younger there wasn't any woman who could be considered above me on beauty terms. Aster was totally convinced of that. Alessia, Eileen, Rhea and his mother were on the top of the pyramid and could be considered peerless beauties. As for Alice and Arya, they were beautiful in all the meaning of the word, but just as little flowers, they still needed some time to fully bloom. Alice on the other hand wasn't going to let her mother have the last word. Humph, haven't you heard the saying, future generations always surpass the older ones? Just wait a few more years, I bet Aster would not be able to stop drooling for me. Aster shook his head. He turned on the shower spirit formation and water drops like rain started falling from the ceiling. He dragged both his sister and Arya with him to give Lilia some space to clean herself from all the fluids that he left inside of her. He offered to help her do it, but Lilia didn't accept, and seeing that his other two girls were getting a bit jealous, he decided to give them some attention. Having a harem is harder than one would might think, he thought. Alice was used to have skin-to-skin contact with her brother, but Arya felt a bit shy. Although Aster only wrapped his arm around her waist like always this time, she could feel his body warmness on her naked skin. Aster slowly moved his hands downwards to place them on their asses. He couldn't help but lick his lips when he noticed that the both of them were already a bit wet. I have always been fair, so how about I give you two some love to be on par with Mom, he. Alice immediately nodded while Arya seemed to doubt a bit before doing the same. Just lean against the wall and relax, I will take care of the rest, he said. Alice was visibly excited because she knew what was about to happen, while Arya could guess because she saw Aster licking Lilia's pussy yesterday and she felt a bit nervous. What if he doesn't like mine? What if I don't taste good? Ugh, hi. This is so nerve-wracking. Aster felt Arya's legs tremble a bit and he internally shook his head. I have a lot of work to do with this girl, but that is the fun part, he. Aster decided to start with Alice to give Arya some time to prepare. He rubbed his face against her ass to enjoy the soft feeling of her skin before gently spreading her butt cheeks. He immediately noticed the little handle of the butt plug sticking out of her pink little hole. It's been some time since your training started, sis. How do you feel so far? He asked while removing the butt plug from her ass. Take it out slowly, I'm more sensitive back there than before. Aster smiled before he started licking her cute pinkish hole, which made Alice move her hips around a bit. She has been regularly taking care of her back door by removing the butt plug to maintain herself clean, so after taking it out and inserting it again a couple of times she has already started to enjoy the feeling, quite a bit. Aster was amazed by how much she has progressed in such a little amount of time. Seems like sis has natural talent for this, he. He stuck his tongue inside of her tight little hole, which took Alice by surprise. She couldn't contain her moans anymore, especially because Aster started rubbing her pussy at the same time. Feeling the two-front attack from her brother, a sudden overwhelming sensation of pleasure assaulted her brain. Aster felt her insides tremble a bit before a large amount of fragrant love juice drenched his face. MMH. Gulp gulp. As always, Aster enjoyed drinking Alice's sweet juices directly from the source, while using his hands to hold her in place. Alice's legs gave out after she reached her climax, so she slowly slid down until her body was completely resting on the floor of the bathroom. Aster admired the result of all his efforts. Alice's anus was twitching a bit as her climax was still going. He kissed one of her butt cheeks before turning to see his next victim, but judging by her current lust-filled expression she would not put any resistance. And he was right. After watching he making love to Lilia yesterday and then all the things he did to Alice, Arya was so excited that she was unconsciously rubbing her thighs against each other. He stood up before hugging her from behind, which made Arya startle a bit because she felt his thing pressing against her ass, but her mind almost went blank when Aster used his hand to directly touch her flower for the first time while he whispered in her ears. "You look so cute with the horny expression you have right now, he he he." Aster gently inserted the tip of his middle finger inside her pussy, which immediately rewarded him with her cute moaning voice. Wait, my heart is still not prepared, Aster moved his finger a bit before kissing her nape. "Don't worry, leave it all to me." Chapter 93. The Star of the Overlord, the Star of Creation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aster took out his finger out of her pussy. He smiled seeing the transparent fragrant liquid that was drenching his hand before he licked it while making sure that she saw him doing it. "Well, seems like my cute Arya is sweet to the very core, he he he." He started kissing all the way from her nape down to her ass. Woo! Arya felt her insides twitch a bit in anticipation for what was about to happen, and she was right. Aster gently spread her butt cheeks to have a complete view of that beautiful pink paradise. Aster held her hips in place with his hands before burying his face on her ass. Alice felt something warm moving in circles around her back door. It feels strangely good. I like it, she thought. To be fair, Aster has been improving his tongue skills after practicing with Alice a lot of times, so right now his technique was refined enough to please Arya without him being as rough as the first time he did it with his sister. Aster was enjoying Arya's taste. So far, every girl had her unique fragrance and taste. Arya had the sweetest love juices he had tried so far. While he was engrossed in the moment, Alice, who was still lying in the floor of the bathroom, finally regained her composure. She saw her brother focusing his attention on Arya, so she was about to give them some space while waiting for her turn, but then she noticed his brother's thing was hard and ready for some action, so she licked her lips before she crawled until her face was only a few centimeters away from Aster's crotch. Aster was too concentrated on what he was doing that he only reacted when he noticed the familiar feeling of Alice's mouth wrapping around his penis. The sudden pleasure made him stop what he was doing to look downwards, only to see his sister moving her head up and down over his crotch. Alice noticed her brother's hot gaze and she internally smiled. So what if Mom was the first? I'm the only one that knows your weak spots so far, he he he. Cool, she is really good at this, he thought. Alice was right. After all that practice, she has gotten a hang of how to please him with her mouth. Arya felt her lover stopping, and when she turned her head around to see what was happening, she saw Alice eating Aster's thing. This cat thief of a sister, she thought. Aster could feel the jealous of Arya and he shook his head before gently spanking her. "No fighting, okay? I will take care of you both." Of course he didn't stop Alice since she was doing such a good job. Instead he pulled Arya's ass towards him and continued where he left, but this time, he decided to be a bit rougher. Hi-ya! Arya felt his tongue entering her ass and her hands almost slid from the wall due to the surprise. Aster started moving his tongue inside of her rectum, which made Arya let out loud noises. At first, she tried to contain her moans, but then she noticed that Aster accelerated the pace whenever her moans escaped from her. He likes to hear my moans. Stupid Alice invading my turn. I will show you that I can also seduce him, she thought. From that moment she stopped holding back her voice, not only that she even unconsciously started moving her ass around as if she was tempting him to eat her. After a couple of minutes Aster noticed that Alice was augmenting her pace and he also decided it was time to wrap things up with Arya, so he spread her ass a bit more with his hands before moving his tongue faster than before until he felt Arya's insides twitching. he moved one of his hands downwards and pressed Alice's face against his crotch while he unleashed his load inside her mouth. Ahem. Two different sweet moans echoed through the room while Arya reached her climax and her juices splat all over Aster's face. The other one was Alice, who was desperately swallowing the huge load his brother was letting out. Thud. Both Alice and Arya collapsed in the floor of the bathroom. While they gasped for air, Aster was still feeling horny, but he was not selfish enough to only care about himself, so he only patted their heads before standing up and going below the shower formation to wash off all the fluids that were covering his body right now. Phew, that was refreshing. Now I only want to relax a bit on the bathtub, he thought. Lilia was already in the bathtub since she finished cleaning herself before Aster directly sat on her legs, which made her smile. I saw those two breathing heavily, but you seem to be full of energy. Seems like you really have awakened a high-ranked talent for body cultivation. Hee. Aster gave her a slight kiss before answering. Of course, I have to build up some good stamina since I will have to satisfy 2 dragon girls in the future. Ha. Aster wanted to relax for a moment, so he leaned his head against Lilia's chest, who as a diligent wife started caressing his hair. Feeling the comfortable touch of his mother, Aster closed his eyes before entering the mind space. Since he has officially become a couple with Lilia and Arya, another 2 stars should be waiting for him on the mind space, and he was right. Previously only 2 stars were radiating light, Pollux, which was linked to Alice, and Aldebaran, which represented the twins, and now there was 2 new stars which were illuminating the sky. One of them had a bright light which combined white and blue colors, while the other was completely red, but there were chains around it. Rhea, is there something wrong? Why is one of the stars restricted? He asked. Rhea appeared in front of him. Nop, everything is okay, it's just that the ability from that star is impossible to control by the current you, so until you surpass your first tribulation it would be sealed, but don't worry, the star would keep evolving properly as your relationship with Lilia keep on developing. Aster had a complex expression. It's going to be hard to explain to her why I got an ability from Alice and Arya and not one due to her, you know. Rhea smiled. Who told you to be a playboy, Humph? Speaking of that, your mother is a complete monster. Even I felt apprehensive seeing the stars she formed a link with. The stars that haven't illuminated yet are blank templates. That's why only when you form a bond with a girl one of them will transform to match the chosen girl. In this case your mother called something quite incredible. Orionis, the star of the Overlord. The other one is not worse than Orionis by any means though, but just like Pollux you will have to gradually unleash its potential. Rigel, the star of creation, you can try its ability right now. Extend your hand and think on Arya. He did as she told, and a little light blue flame appeared in his hand. Unlike what one would expect, it wasn't hot but cold, and although it didn't affect his hand, the surrounding ground started to cover in ice in just a few seconds, which made Aster dispel the flame to not cause any harm to the mind space. I might not be an expert, but don't you need heat to create things, or am I misunderstanding the purpose of Rigel? Rhea smiled. I won't spoil the surprise. My duty and pleasure are to guide and protect you, but I won't interfere in your cultivation path, and you don't seem to need it. After all, you figured out how to use something as dangerous as annihilation. Aster didn't know if he should be thankful or not. On one hand she had a good argument. Your path must be decided by yourself, because if you try to imitate someone else then that person's limit will be yours too. Sigh, I have so many things to do, he answered. It's also going to be a pain to tell Mom and Arya about Hyperion, but I don't want them to feel left aside, and I know Alice will slip at some point and tell them about Pollux, so I might as well tell them myself at once. Rhea shook her head. Speaking of Pollux, I have to say that you certainly have some crazy ideas. Using annihilation to enhance the Golden Paragon body manifestation is something that I didn't think it was even possible, and you did it as if it was something easy. Aster nodded. I told you, it likes to be near me, so it is way easier to control when I'm in contact with it. Technically the manifestation is a part of me, so I tried it and it worked quite well, although it made my spirit energy reserve to dramatically drop after using it for only a few moments. Rhea didn't know whether she should laugh or cry. You are a monster too. Haha, They both laughed before Aster left the mind space. Since he couldn't use the power of Oriones, then he will have to explain his mother using Pollux and Rigel as an example. Chapter 94 Honesty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Once Aster opened his eyes, he saw Alice and Arya sitting next to Lilia, one at each side. The bathtub was big enough to fit more than 10 people, so it was more correct to consider it something like a pool. Leaving that aside, Aster noticed they somehow looked a bit different, as if they were brimming with vitality. Their skin looked smoother and even their hair looked so as if it was made of the finest silk. One could imagine, seems like you two really benefited from our little session. I wonder if it is because you two got some nutrients from the actual me who is undergoing a fundamental physical change, he said. Lilia nodded. Not only them, honey, after the past night I can feel how my cultivation is recovering at least 10 times faster than before. Who would have thought that making love with my darling would even benefit me, since I'm way ahead in cultivation terms. According to the dual cultivation technique I read, I will need more daily session to recover faster. He. Mom, you would have done it with him regardless of that. Aster, don't you notice something different on me? Aster was in an inner debate. That is a lethal question coming from your lover, god damn, he thought. After looking at her carefully, he did notice something. Alice's eyes seemed different. Your eyes, they seem to be livelier than before, he said. Alice smiled. Nice answer. He. Yep, they look like this because I just broke through. So your older sister is now a cultivator on the early stage of star formation realm. Aster was in awe. I was just messing around, but it seems like she actually benefited from drinking that, he thought. Rhea helped him clear his doubts. You are evolving into something new thanks to the golden paragon body in your original bloodline, so we will have to wait for the result, although it seems like exchanging yin and yang with them has good effects on their cultivation. Seriously, what kind of monster are you? Aster remained silent for a moment before answering. If that is the case, then, wouldn't I be able to help you in the same way? He. Rhea was baffled. Don't you have enough material to work right now? Besides, even if I want to, the me you can see and touch right now on the mind space is only a materialization of my spirit energy, so I don't think it would work like that. Aster internally shrugged. Well, we don't lose anything by trying. Let me tell you a little secret, miss. Materialization of spirit energy. Maybe it's because of my bloodline, but my nose is quite sensible to a certain type of fragrance, so even if you try to hide it, I still notice the faint traces of love juice. He. Inside the mind space, Rhea's face turned red as a tomato. What are you, some kind of horny dog, she thought. If you find at least one of the materials from the list I gave you, then we will talk about this. Also, that was only a natural reaction due to a certain pervert master showing me all kind of things since yesterday. Aster laughed. You can consider it studying for the future. Ha. Rhea shook her head. I'll return to my meditation. Aster was amused by her reaction. When he entered the mind space before, he felt a thin familiar sweet smell, but it was hard for him to believe that Rhea touched herself while seeing him and Lilia doing it. But after contemplating things for a moment, there was no other possible reason, since she was the only one on the mind space besides him. She ran away. How cute. Once they finished bathing, Aster told the girls to come with him because he had something to discuss with them. Of course, they have decided to sleep all in the same room. Even Arya was not shy about it anymore. After all, both Lilia and Arya have already saw her climaxing, so she could not imagine something more shameful than that for the time being. They dried off before dressing up. Since today they had no plans to go out, the girls just put on some casual light clothes. The girls sat on the edge of the bed, one next to other, while Aster stood in front of them before he proceeded to tell them the same story about Hyperion that Alice knew, that the sword appeared after his awakening ceremony, which was not a lie because he didn't have the mind space before that. Unlike what he expected, Lilia didn't seem to particularly care about Hyperion nor the stars. Instead, she showed a somewhat angry expression when he reached the part about the twins, and she was not the only one. Alice also seemed annoyed because she thought that her brother didn't keep anything in secret from her. Darling, how many girls are you hiding from me? Asked Lilia with a smile that was not a smile. Noel de Aster doubted for a second before raising 3 fingers on his right hand. Ahem, besides the twins there is other one you will know in the future. but I swear they are the only ones, and it's not that I deliberately hid their existence from you. Due to some reasons they can't be here with us right now, so I didn't know how to explain about them before, but I decided to tell you all this because it's not fair that I expect you be honest with me when I'm not doing the same. Arya shrugged as she decided to speak on his behalf. Since I started suspecting about you and Alice, I came to accept the fact that I would have to share you with other girls. As long as you don't hide them from us, I don't have anything against them, but you better don't start flirting with everyone you see. Humph. Both Lilia and Alice nodded. Fine, I won't inquire in the past, but from now and onwards if you want to bring more girls home, then we will have to meet them first. It is my duty as your mother to see if they are good for my darling or if they have some ulterior motives, said Lilia. Alice agreed with her mother for once. Mom is right, besides you don't have free time for new girls, so just focus on giving love to me. I mean to us, he. Aster let out a sigh of relief. That seems fair enough for me. Each of them could have found a man which would only look at them for the rest of their lives, but instead they choose to be with him knowing that he had other women in his heart, and he was truly glad for that, so a bit of compromise on his side was nothing compared to that. Now, as I was saying, each of the stars has its own characteristics. Alice is linked to Pollux, which ability I have already shown to both Mom and Arya, so there is no need to explain more about that. As for the twins, the star is called Aldebaran and its power is evolution, but for the time being I can only process one thing at the time and they are using it right now, so we will leave that for later. Since yesterday I have two new stars. One of them is Oriones, which is linked to Mom, but according to what I know, my current cultivation is not strong enough to control its power, so it is unavailable for now. And last but not least is Rigel, which is linked to Arya. Its power is supposed to be creation, but I still need to learn how to use it. Let me show you, maybe Mom knows more about this. Aster manifested a little quantity of Rigel's flame on the tip of his index finger. Lilia stood up and got close to him. The flame was too tiny to affect the surrounding like back then on mind space, but it still gave of a cold feeling around Aster, but Lilia didn't feel uncomfortable at all. After inspecting it for a moment, Lilia seemed a bit confused. It is weird, it kind of reminds me the flame of a spirit blacksmith, but at the same time it is also like the flame of an alchemist, but the best description I can think of is a spirit flame. On places where the spirit energy and strong elements mix together under some extremely rare circumstances, the element might create a consciousness, thus giving birth to a spirit. The only problem is that I haven't heard of anyone being able to control such a thing. They are basically forces of the nature, and it's not limited to fire. There are records of spirit lightning or even trees that develop a consciousness, but after appearing they leave as they don't interact with other living beings. Aster stopped his mother for a moment. But I don't feel any thoughts from this flame, so why do you say that it resembles a spirit flame? Lilia smiled. You couldn't feel it, but when I got close to you for a moment that little thing tried to scare me, probably because it thought that I represent a threat to you, but then after scanning me it became docile, so it is capable of taking decisions on its own. Aster was speechless. If that was the case, then Rigel's ability was even better than what he thought, but listening to his mother's words he also wanted to clear a question that has been bugging him for a long time. Mom, since we decided to not keep anything on secret to each other, I want to know, what is your current cultivation? What is there above the star tribulation realm? Chapter 95, The Big Scheme of the Things. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since the moment Aster got back the bloodline from the Drage, Lilia already decided to tell him about her family. Make yourself comfortable, darling, it's going to be a long story, she said. Aster sat on the bed cross-legged in front of his mother. Both Alice and Arya sat at each of his sides. Let's start with some context for you to understand the difference between the place in we live currently to where we would go in the future. First, an aggregation of planets is called star cluster. There are countless of them in the infinite vastness of all the creation, and each of them is separated by something we call stellar boundary, which is basically a wall that prevents the different star cluster to collide with each other. Above that is what we call stellar systems. They not naturally formed, instead they are the result of a force or family controlling at least 50 star clusters and installing a space gate that allow them to enter each one of those star clusters. And finally, a celestial quadrant is formed by at least 100 stellar systems which are ruled by a Heavenly Conqueror Realm Cultivator. The Radia star cluster in which we currently reside is one of the lowest-ranked star clusters of the Atria stellar system, one of the many systems owned by the Drage family. Needless to say it, but the Drage are the rulers of the Dragon Legacy Heavenly Quadrant, and technically you are the next in the line of succession to all that, darling. Aster was in awe. He supposed that Lilia had a big background, but that it turned out to be way bigger than what he expected. Not only him, Arya almost forgot how to breathe after listening to how little was the Azure Sky planet where she has lived all her life in comparison with the big scheme of the things. It's not like she has ever believed that the Azure Sky planet was a great thing or something like that, but the information she heard from Lilia was a bit too much. Aster shook his head. Let's leave that aside for now. What I'm truly interested in is that Heavenly Conqueror realm you spoke about. How far is that from the Star Tribulation realm? Lilia smiled. After the Star Tribulation, a cultivator enters the Transcending Realms. Mortal Transcending Realm, Sea of Knowledge Realm, Genesis Manifestation Realm, Void Manipulation Realm, Law Integration Realm, and after that, the Heavenly Realms are next. Heavenly Transformation Realm, Heavenly Comprehension Realm, Heavenly Manifestation Realm, Heavenly Conqueror Realm. Mommy used to be a Heavenly Transformation Realm cultivator, but right now I'm barely at the Genesis Manifestation Realm, although I kept some of the abilities of my previous cultivation, like the capacity to bend space to travel, which is the main characteristic of a void manipulation. Unfortunately, my reserve of spirit energy is not enough to travel between star clusters like before, so at best I can go to other planets within the same star cluster. Basically, the Drage family is managed by my father, who is a heavenly manifestation cultivator, while my great-grandfather is the ancestor of our family and the only heavenly conqueror of the Dragon Legacy Quadrant. The reason as to why I ended in such a faraway place like this planet is that only a man can inherit the patriarch position. My father tried to force me to marry someone I didn't even know, but I threatened him by saying that I would leave the family if he insisted on that, and thanks to the support of a couple of friends and their backings, I was able to avoid that, but I still was requested to give birth to a son. Aster could more or less guess what happened after that, but he still had one doubt. But why did you come all the way to this planet, Mom? Lilia kissed her son before continuing. I didn't want to stay at the family because there was too many gazes focused on me, and since I needed a strong blood to combine with mine for the spirit formation, I told you I used before, I looked for news of a forgotten family which bloodline acted as an amplifier of the characteristics inherited by those who had it. I followed all the hints until I arrived at the end of the way. Turns out the last member of that family was the founder of the Wolfstein family. Isaac was the strongest cultivator of the family, so I got his blood, and that is how Alice was birthed. I waited some years because I wanted to raise Alice properly, although it seems like I failed, he. Mum, complained Alice. She still remembered the strict Lilia from back then, and it still made her feel chills running through her body. Lilia laughed at her daughter's reaction. As expected, when I told my father about Alice, he was not happy, but I didn't care about all that. On the worst case, I could always join another force and he would no be able to do anything about it, so his only option was to shut up and wait. I waited until Alice went through her awakening ceremony before trying it again, and the heavens gave me the greatest gift I could ever ask. She pointed at Aster before saying, you. Unfortunately, I developed a heart demon due to all the hatred I had for my family, so I suffered a deviation, which would have been the end of the road for me if not for Aster using his own origin blood to stabilize me. After I safely gave birth, I saw my precious son not having any of the characteristics of the Drage, and then I knew that if I returned to my clan he would be discriminated. Lilia dragged Aster into her embrace while she caressed his hair. So, I took the decision to stay on this planet to recover my cultivation and also train him to be a powerful cultivator. The only condition your grandfather put was that we need to return to the clan on our own and before you turn 18, but the decision is up to you, darling. You are the most talented cultivator I have ever seen, reaching the Earth origin realm at the young age of 7 years old, so there is no way for you to lose in the successor war. Lilia seemed to contemplate something before she smiled. On the other hand, I'm pretty sure a storm will arise once they know you are my lover, he. Aster had a complex expression. Well, I sure feel proud of conquering you, Mom, but I can only imagine the number of angry old suitors that will come to look for trouble, ha ha ha, he said. Lilia laughed. Well, that is the price you must pay for getting such a beauty as me, or would you rather let mommy be taken away from you, she said with a sad voice. Aster saw her feigned sad teary eyes and he internally sighed, that's a low blow, she is so goddamn cute when she acts like this. He wrapped his arms while resting his hands on Lilia's ass and pressed his lips against hers. It's not like you would let any other guy besides me touch you like this, right, my beautiful wife, he he he. Alice saw them in their own world and she interrupted. Ahem, leaving that aside, since you're not a void manipulation cultivator anymore, how are we going to travel to other stars clusters, Mom? Lilia didn't bother to take Aster's hands of her ass before answering. I have a personal spaceship on my storage ring which would allow us to travel as fast as a heavenly manifestation realm with the proper fuel, and since I have the token of the Drage family there won't be any problem to use the space gates of this stellar system. We will leave once your brother also reach the star formation realm. As for the final destination, that is up to Aster to decide. Chapter 96 Body Cultivation and Soul Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The rest of the day paled in comparison with the emotional roller coaster they experienced in the past night and today's morning. Now that Alice reached the star formation, she needed to learn how to control her attribute, so Lilia dragged her to another room to train. Aster originally wanted to rest, but Alice wanted to hear Lilia's lesson since she used to be such a high-ranked cultivator, so she also followed them, which ultimately led him to do the same. Shouldn't you be taking care of your husband instead of cultivating for just one day, he thought while sitting down on the training room. Once everyone was in the room, Lilia started her lesson. Every realm has its own focus, which tend to be related to the name of the realm. In this case, the star formation realm requires you to form the first star of your future inner universe. This star will also have some other important functions in the future, but for now we will focus on the current importance of it. When you reach the Earth origin realm, your soul idol turns into an orb-looking brown thing, that is a star nucleus. For you to reach the star formation realm you need to cover that nucleus with the attribute you have affinity with. In this case for me and Alice that will be destruction. Once you have managed to do it, then you will automatically advance to the star formation realm. That is also the reason as to why we are able to manipulate our attribute more easily once we reach this realm, because we will have a reserve of it inside ourselves instead of having to gather it from the surrounds like before. Aster felt relieved listening to her words. Right now the annihilation he has been using is of course his, but it is not stored inside of him, but it is the one that Hyperion radiates. That is why he has to use a lot of spirit energy to gather enough of it for an attack. That is a weakness that will be fixed once he forms his star. Mom, according to the manual, now that I have formed my star, I can also start cultivating my body, right? Asked Alice. Lilia nodded. Yes, the reason as to why we who cultivate energy first only start body cultivation after the Earth origin realm is that you need to template your body with your own element, since other people might have the same affinity but their element is theirs and it will be harmful to train using it. The Might of the Dragon King manual we use indicates the method, which generally described consists in bathing on the destruction attribute. By doing so it will start integrating with your body, which will reinforce it. Of course, it is a gradual process. You might ask how are body or soul cultivators realms divided, and it is actually the same division as energy cultivation, since that was the first method discovered by humanity. The only difference is the last realm of each division. For example, for body cultivators, instead of soul manifestation, the peak of the mortal realms is called body solidification. As for soul cultivators it is called spirit opening, for the earth realms in the body path instead of the star tribulation their realm is called carnal disaster. As for the soul path it is spirit trial. For the transcending realms body cultivators call their peak realm gate transcending. Lilia doubted for a moment before continuing. As I told you, we have only started discovering the mysteries of the soul recently, so currently no one has understood how to surpass the spirit trial realm, but technically the next peak realm for them is called Soul King. And finally the equal to the heavenly conqueror realm in body cultivation is the astral palace. As for soul cultivation it doesn't exist yet. You might ask why only the peak realm of each division has a different name, and the answer to that is that only on the peak realms there are differences between the three paths. For energy cultivators you get the soul idol on the soul manifestation, for the body cultivators they get a huge increment in their strength and the toughness of their body in general. Soul cultivators get an increment in their processing capacity which helps them to comprehend things faster than others. Aster was baffled. Every path had its own advantages. "Mom, is there someone who has reached the peak on more than one path?" he asked. "No, body cultivation was invented originally for those who didn't have a strong dantian that could store spirit energy on an efficient way, so instead they made the spirit energy circulate through their whole bodies. Those whose main path is body cultivation suffer a lot of inner wounds due to that, but the heavens are fair, all those wounds will be cured once they reach the gate transcending realm. That is why people tend to prefer energy cultivation first before doing body cultivation, since by doing it this way you won't suffer any damage because of the gap between your progress in both paths. However, once you reach the peak of the transcending realms on any of the paths, your progress on the other will suffer a huge slowdown. That was one of the reasons as to why many idiots on the Drage family were after me. Since I'm the only one that have both red eyes and black hair, their supposition is that I might have the chance to become the first cultivator to reach transcendence on two paths. Aster internally smiled. "Shame for them, since you are already mine, he thought, but then he realized something. Wait a second, Mom, if no one has reached the peak in soul cultivation, then doesn't that make those who cultivate their soul weaker than others?" Lilia shook her head. "The known heavenly conquerors at most have reached what would be the Genesis manifestation realm in terms of body cultivation, while astral palace cultivators are the same, they at most are in the Genesis manifestation on terms of energy cultivation. The most accepted theory is that reaching the peak of the transcending realms marks a fundamental change on cultivators, so it becomes harder to advance on other paths. So, the balance in power is the same, since those who cultivate either energy soul or body/soul are the also in what would be the Genesis manifestation in soul terms. Of course no one is stupid enough to cultivate on soul first, knowing they would stagnate for sure at some point." "That makes sense," he said. Lilia smiled. "That being said, for you to advance on body cultivation order, skin, flesh, blood, organs, bones, marrow, once you finish integrating your attribute on your marrow, then you will reach the body solidification realm. The process is the same for all the stages, but it requires different levels of concentration. On my experience, you should be able to reach the marrow stage in more or less 3 years. This will not hinder your progress on energy cultivation, since your star will gather your element on its own. The speed of that depends on your talent for energy cultivation, but since you have the red eye characteristic of the Drage, I won't worry about that, and of course you can dedicate some time to do it manually to accelerate the process." Lilia took a few steps back before saying, "I will do a demonstration to give you an idea of how to start the process of integrating your attribute with your skin." She closed her eyes and thin layer of dark flames covered her whole body before it started rotating around her as if it was trying to enter her skin pores. After a couple of seconds, Lilia stopped the process and opened her eyes. "Everyone does it at his own rhythm. I could stand using the method I showed you, and since you have the amplification from the Wolfstein, you shouldn't have any problems to do it the same way." Chapter 97 Aftermath. You are listening at novelfull.audio. All this time Arya stayed silent until she saw that Alice started gathering her attribute to replicate what Lilia did a moment ago. It took her a moment before she decided to ask what was on her mind. "Do you know the process to cultivate the soul?" "Now that I have awakened my ice attribute, my manual shows a new section for soul cultivating." Lilia more or less expected that, although she could deduce that Arya's manual was a high-level one, she could not see its secrets since she didn't have the same constitution as her. She put on a comforting smile. "Don't worry, although I'm not a soul cultivator, one of my old friends is one, so I know the basics of it. For them on the mortal division there is only one process, mind insight. Similar to the way your soul idol is created, you need to meditate while remembering everything you have experienced. According to my friend, the trick is focus on both your best and worst memories, and once you came to a conclusion with them you will reach the spirit opening realm." Aster hugged Arya. What kind of masochist invented this way of cultivating, he thought. Although it sounded easier than body cultivation, having to revive and affront your worst moments was something really hard, especially for those who have gone through a lot like Arya. Arya smiled, feeling Aster worry for her. I will be fine, all the things my family made me go through were what allowed me to meet you that day at the inn, so I already know that I have a good ending for that episode of my life. Lilia completely agreed with her. She is right, darling. In fact, I bet she will recover the years she lost only cultivating on the energy path. Thanks to that, reaching the spirit opening is not a matter of time but of character growth, so if my supposition is correct, Arya will be able to achieve it in approximately 1 year. Aster sighed. I wonder if Eileen might be able to help Arya on soul cultivation. She had that calm and relaxed aura around her after all, he thought before saying. Fine, just be careful. Aster excused himself before leaving the training room while Lilia stayed to supervise Alice and Arya on their first session of body and soul cultivation. Aster returned to Lilia's room, or more accurately, their room, since now they will be sleeping together every night. The reason as to why he left the training room was that he needed to do 2 things. The top priority was to create Lilia's ring. Originally, he wanted to give it to He before crossing the last line, but just as the say goes, man proposes, God disposes, and the devil decomposes. He didn't have the chance to work on the ring before he had sex with her. This is also a good chance to test out Rigel's flame, he thought. Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to use the black star or he got on the auction to test his flame, so instead he took out one of the swords he bought on the Craft Family Weapon Shop. He held it with his left hand while summoning a tiny hand-sized portion of Rigel's flame on his right hand. Unfortunately, when the flame touched the sword, this suddenly cracked before breaking into little crystals. This repeated a couple of times until Aster found the proper amount of flame to use on the sword without breaking it. He practically reduced the size of the flame to a quarter of what he originally was using. The biggest difference was that instead of freezing the sword, the metal became easier to manipulate as if it was some kind of fluid, but without losing the shape of the sword. The best comparison Aster could think of was a certain robot villain from the future which appeared on the 2nd chapter of a movie series. It was weird, wherever the flame passed, the metal of the sword adopted that unique state only to lose it after he separated the sword from it. After moving the flame around the sword, it became unrecognizable with some spirals and other weird curves on the edge. He took out another sword and put it on the ground in front of him, while using the same intensity of flames but on a larger scale. This time the flame was big enough to cover the whole sword. He started moving his hands as if he was drawing on the air, and the previously destroyed sword recovered its original shape, which he recreated using another sword as the model. How convenient. I didn't need to het the metal or anything, it just became easy to mold. It makes sense that Rigel is called the Star of Creation. I can't imagine how useful this flame will be for a blacksmith or an alchemist. Now that he more or less understood how to use the flame, he only needed to find the correct amount of intensity to process the black star iron. But first he tried molding the metal of the sword to take the form of a ring. It was hard because he was controlling the metal by making movements with his hands. He found an especial difficulty on making the little details because the metal distorted way easily. After failing a couple of times, he dispelled the flame. The metal was unrecognizable and it also looked worn out as if it had been eroded by the pass of the years. Damn, this flame is really hard to control. He threw the metal that was not suited to be used anymore, but before he could take out another sword to keep on trying, but this time he tried a different thing. Instead of just keeping the flame still, he created little wisps of flame on the tip of his fingers. This new method seemed to work better. In fact, Aster noticed that focusing the flame in small quantities made it easier for him to manipulate the metal. After a couple of minutes of concentration, he was able to finish the model. Feeling satisfied of the result, he took out the piece of black star iron and started working to imitate the model. Once the main body of the ring was finished, he took out a red gem called Fire Ruby and placed it in the middle part of the ring. He noticed that if he wanted, he could have changed the form of the femme just like he did with metal, but since he only already fused the gem on the metal, he didn't dare to change anything else. In front of him it was the result of the best he could do right now with Rigel's flame, a ring made out of black metal decorated with a red gem. Aster nodded. Pretty good if you ask men. I wonder what would that cray guy expression would be if he knew I used the black star iron to create a ring, ha ha ha. The sooner the better was one of the best ways to act, so based on that he immediately decoded to give Lilia the ring, but when he was about to leave the room, he noticed his communication talisman glowing. For a moment he thought that maybe something urgent happened since he saw Kale's mark on the talisman, but then he remembered that it was time for Kale's report. As expected, it was a message from Kale. Apparently after the ruckus he created on Galleria the day of the auction, the Rain family basically ran away from this planet because they were afraid of the possible retaliation that might come thanks to Kray's actions, so now the one in charge of everything regarding the Rain family was Kale. The Rain family patriarch ordered all of them to remain low until the day of the secret realm exploration in Zarsha comes in 3 years. Even the Wolfstein were afraid of getting involved, so Isaac washed his hands off the whole situation and isolated himself for closed-door cultivation. Speaking of the exploration, Kale gathered some rumors about it, and apparently the Rain family invited some guests to come with them, but he couldn't find any other information about them since only his father established contact. The other important notice was that Kray will be grounded for a long time to reflect on his actions, so he won't be attending Arthur's birthday ceremony. Aster was amused by the results of his actions. Originally my idea was to scare them away on Uncle Arthur's birthday ceremony, but it seems like they won't be going anyway, hahaha. According to Kale's report, out of all the big forces that planned to attend Arthur's birthday, be it to court Arya or some other reason, only a few decided to come due to the recent horror the Rain family suffered. On the other hand, both the Kraft and Asher family did not abandon the planet. Wieland Kraft publicly declared that he had some interactions with the Golden Reaper, and there wasn't any bad blood between their families and him, so there was nothing they should be afraid of. Aster smiled, remembering the good impression Wieland left in him. Those who own nothing fear nothing, huh? That old man from the auction house surely is quite smart, by saying that the Kraft and the Asher will flourish for the following years while the Rain family needs to keep a low profile and Isaac just plays dumb. I can't wait for the ceremony of tomorrow. Chapter 98 Eric's Petition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The rest of the day went by quite fast. Both Alice and Arya were quite tired due to their first experience cultivating body and soul respectively, so they fell asleep quite fast. As for Lilia, she happily cuddled with Aster after he gave her the ring he created. Since there wasn't going to be any night activities, Aster spent the whole night in the mind space practicing a new trick he planned to use on Arthur's birthday ceremony in case the situation required him to do so. Before he realized it was already morning, the first one to wake up was Alice, and since she noticed that her mother was still sleeping, she helped herself to take the first kiss of the day. Aster opened his eyes, feeling the soft pair of lips of his sister pressing against his. He internally smiled. Looks like she took my request quite serious, huh? Yesterday he told the girls to wake him up with a kiss every morning, and this time the winner was Alice since she woke up before Arya or Lilia. Alice was all smiles right now. Good morning, she said. Aster returned the kiss before saying, Good morning, sis. Did you set some kind of alarm or something? You are usually the last to wake up, hahaha. Their little conversation woke Lilia up, and she saw his daughter already flirting with Aster, which made her feel a bit jealous. Good morning, darling, come give mommy some love. Aster shook his head. Come on, is too early to be competing between each other, he thought, but he still gave Lilia a morning kiss. The last one to wake up was Arya. It seems like soul cultivation is quite tiring, which is understandable considering that mental fatigue is harder to get rid of than the physical one. Lilia carefully examined both Alice and Arya just to make sure they weren't suffering any side effect or deviation. It's better to be safe than sorry, after all. Lilia nodded. She took out a pair of pill bottles from her storage ring and handed one to each of them. Alice, your body is quite sturdy, so I don't see any negative effects. I'm giving you this flesh-nurturing pill. You only need to take one per month, and it will help you to have a smooth progress on body cultivation until you reach the body solidification realm. Arya, you don't show any sign of suffering deviation, but is normal to be mentally fatigued and suffer from slight headache due to the tension soul cultivation put in your mind on the first stages. This mind-cleansing pill will immediately cure all that. The effect is quite long-lasting, so one per month should be enough too. Both of them took their respective pills and they all stood up from the bed. since Arthur's birthday ceremony started midday, they took a quick bath before Lilia transported them to Galleria to take breakfast on the fragrant pavilion. When the waiter went to get their order, they heard someone knocking on the door of the room. Astor opened the door and the one outside was Eric Asher, who had his usual smiling expression. Behind him the old man Egil was standing with a somewhat defeated expression. "Yo, my friend, I saw you entering the restaurant and I came to say hi. I hope you don't mind." "Ha ha ha," said Eric. Egil Asher sighed. "Good morning, little friend. Please don't take it against my nephew, he is a bit pushy when it comes to people. He finds interesting. If you have some free time, can you listen to what he has to say?" Astor allowed them to enter the room. "No problem, come on in. We just recently ordered our food, so it's going to take some time until the waiter deliver the dishes." Eric entered without any doubts while Egil followed after. Astor sat back in the middle of his girls while Eric and Egil took seat in front of them. He noticed that Egil's expression changed to a humble, respectful one when he saw his mother, so it was obvious that the old man could somehow feel that Lilia was stronger than him. Eric smiled. "Uncle Egil told me it is a sign of goodwill to present first, so I'm Eric Asher, the youngest son, Einar Asher, the current patriarch of the Asher family." Astor actually found Eric fit to be his friend. He was quite straightforward and his personality was likable, so he didn't mind getting along with him, but he still decided to test the waters. "I didn't present myself before. My name is Astor Drage. The ladies at my side are my mother Lilia, my big sister Alice, and one of my future wives, Arya." Eric laughed. "Ha ha ha, now that how a man should be surrounded by beauties, let me offer you a toast to commemorate this moment," said Eric while asking his uncle to take out a bottle of something called monkey wine. Egil sighed, "This stupid nephew always looking for an excuse to drink my precious wine. Whatever, my older brother will have to give more to make up for it," he thought. Seeing his uncle pouring wine on cups he had on his spatial ring, Eric was happy. "I will call you Brother Astor from now on. This wine is made by a spirit beast called Rock Monkey. They gather a special kind of fruit and ferment it to make this wine, which has cultivation-enhancing properties. It is kind of hard to get since the pack leader of the Rock Monkeys is a beast on the middle stage of the Star Axis realm, so I hope you like it." Astor drank the wine in one go. It actually had a sweet taste as if it didn't contain alcohol, and he immediately noticed the spirit energy entering his body at a slightly faster rate than before. "Good wine," he said. The girls also drank it while Egil's heart was bleeding. While he didn't show it on his face, this wine was his personal reserve. The Asher elders formed a team from time to time to raid the nest of the Rock Monkeys. Half of the wine they managed to get was stored on the clan and the other half was divided among the ones that accepted the mission and the patriarch. Eric nodded. "That's good to hear. There is also other thing I wanted to tell you. The first time I met you I saw the young miss of the Gale family with you and I noticed she was already your partner. My older brother is one of the guys that had a crush on her for a long time, so I would like to ask you to, please at least spare his life if you fight with him later today. Just to be clear, I only knew you were related to that girl after I met you, so that was not the reason to get close to you." Arya suddenly connected the points. "Wait, you are the young brother of that brickhead?" she asked in a surprised tone. Eric found her reaction quite funny. "Ha ha ha, yes, Ebby Asher is my brother." Arya saw Astor's frowned expression and she knew that he didn't show mercy for anyone who tried to force her into marriage before, so she explained. "Don't worry, that guy was the only one who actually kept his distance from me after I rejected him. In fact, just like his young brother, he is quite straightforward. Ha ha ha, I remember him asking my father to accept him as his son-in-law while presenting some spirit beasts as a present in the front door of the Gale family grounds." Eric bowed his head, which made Egil surprised. This brat who doesn't show respect for anything nor anyone is actually bowing his head. Maybe the wine was too strong, he thought, until he heard Eric saying, "My brother is a bit stubborn, but he never tried anything malicious to have the attention of this bis sister, so I ask you to not be too severe in case he tries to propose again later." At first Astor thought the Asher family was trying to wash their hands using Eric as a medium, that is why he frowned his face before, but considering how Arya explained the situation he was convinced that Eric's brother was not one of the guys in his list, so he calmed down. I have never wielded my sword against anyone who didn't deserve it, and considering how Arya explained that she wasn't pestered by your brother, I don't hold any grudge against him, so there is no need to worry about that. However, why did you ask me to spare his life? Your brother is probably older than me, so he should be quite strong, isn't he? Eric let out a sigh of relief. Having gotten Aster's confirmation, he returned to his usual relaxed self. Certainly, my brother is at the middle stage of the star formation realm, which is not that bad considering he is 17 years old, but how can he stand a chance against the Golden Reaper? Aster smiled without any intention to deny his affirmation. Oh, I'm quite interested. On how did you know that, he said. Chapter 99 Aster's Gift. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Egil almost choked with the wine he was drinking when he heard his nephew saying that the little boy in front of them was the Golden Reaper. The day of the auction he was one of the spectators, so he saw with his own eyes how Kurt Rain lost one of his arms just because a slight touch of those terrifying golden flames. Like many others that were seeing the show, he tried to simulate what would have happened if the attack was directed at him instead of the Rain family members, and although he was at the peak stellar constellation realm, the best outcome he could imagine was him losing either an arm or a leg before running away for his life. Eric nodded, seeing that Aster didn't bother to hide the fact that his supposition was correct. To be honest, I was half guessing. You see, my body constitution is called Barbarian King Body, and it is a type of constitution that mainly focuses on body cultivation. You probably already know, but there aren't any body cultivators on this planet. Nah, according to my older sister, there aren't body cultivators in this star cluster besides me. I'm not bragging, but my constitution is a quite high-ranked one, so even when I met elders who were above the star tribulation realm, I didn't feel pressured by their body aura. But when I first met you, although I kept my cool on the surface, every cell in my body was screaming, run. Coincidentally, when the Golden Reaper summoned those golden things, I got the same feeling, so I just connected the points. Aster was surprised listening to Eric's explanation, because he seemed to know a lot more about cultivation than the average people of the Radia star cluster, and also, he didn't notice that Eric was a body cultivator. He turned to see his mother because she didn't say anything about that when they met. Lilia just shrugged. He probably has something to hide his cultivation path. I haven't heard about his constitution, but if it is truly mostly suited for body cultivation, then he probably has a high sensibility towards danger, like an enhanced version of instincts. Eric pointed one of the ornaments on his neck, which seemed to be made out of the bones of a spirit beast. That lady is right. This is the legacy treasure of the Barbarian Heart sect, which was given to me due to my special constitution. Since I'm only in the Earth origin realm, I'm not suited to travel in a spaceship yet, so I have to stay in the Azure Sky planet until I reach the star formation realm, and this treasure hides my cultivation path from the eyes of others in the meantime. Egil felt his legs giving up. Just like that, this stupid nephew of mine told basically every secret of our Asher family to someone he has just seen twice. There was only one thing Aster didn't understand. I get the part about your brother and all that, but was it necessary to tell me all this? Your uncle seems to be having a mental breakdown right now, you know. Eric laughed. What's the use of hiding all this when you're probably not a native of this star cluster? Besides, if you wanted to kill us, I have no doubts that both me and Uncle Egil would have not been able to leave this place alive, since that lady over there gives off a stronger presence than the patriarch of the Barbarian Heart sect, he said while pointing at Lilia. Egil shook his head. You brat, why the hell didn't you tell me about all this before we came here? Because then you would have not allowed me to come here if I told you, right? Egil sighed. I swear this stupid brat is going to cause my death someday, he thought. To be honest, Aster was indeed interested in the background of the Asher family now, considering they seemed to have some relation with another star cluster where there were probably mortal transcending realm cultivators, but right now their food arrived, and in an hour, they needed to attend Arthur's birthday ceremony, so his curiosity would have to wait at least until the party. How about we continue this conversation on the party later, he said. Eric nodded before standing up. Sounds good to me. See you in the party, brother Aster. He and Egil left the room and the waiter entered with their dishes. While they were eating, Aster wanted to ask Lilia some things. Mom, have you ever heard about that Barbarian Heart sect? Lilia shook her head. No, to be honest, I only know about forces that have at least one peak transcending realm cultivator, be it a law integration or a gate transcending one. I suppose the best cultivator on that sect must be an early stage Genesis manifestation cultivator, since that treasure he was using was at most a middle stellar rank treasure. Aster seemed to contemplate things for a moment. Are you completely sure of it? Lilia smiled. Immortal rank treasures are really rare, darling. Even if you know a master blacksmith, the materials needed to create one would need to be from at least a heavenly comprehension realm spirit beast, and there would be an 80% chance that the creation fails, so stellar rank treasures tend to be the legacy among low and medium tier ranked forces. Aster smiled. Well, that being the case, I guess I already know our first stop once we leave the Radia star cluster. He has been thinking where will they go once he reaches the star formation realm on the future, and the star cluster where the barbarian heart sect resided seemed to be a good starting point. Not like he was going to join that particular sect, but there were probably other forces, so he will just look for one which rules didn't restrict his freedom. Once they finished eating, Arya guided them to the Gale family grounds. There were some people waiting in line to enter while others were allowed to enter directly. The guards of course didn't dare to keep the young miss of their family waiting, so their group entered directly. Arthur personally came to welcome them. It's good to see you attending this old man's humble ceremony. For a moment I nearly had to cancel it due to some maniac nearly killing the first son of the Rain family patriarch on Galleria. Luckily the administrator of the auction spoke on behalf of our city, saying that the only ones that caused that were the Rain family. Ha ha ha. Arya and Alice couldn't hold their laughs back, which confused Arthur because it was quite a serious topic. I'm sorry Dad, but the maniac you are talking about is in front of you, said Arya while pointing at Aster. Arthur's eyes widened, but after a moment he just sighed. I guess I should have supposed it. Whatever, the auction house guards fixed the hole in the street so we didn't have to spend anything on that, and your little act made the Rain family afraid enough to practically leave this planet, although I heard that the youngest son of Culus Rain stayed to act as the supervisor. Remembering Kale's current status, Aster smiled. Uncle Arthur, I have a present for you. Unfortunately I'm not going to give it to you on public, but I bet it's going to be the best birthday gift you have ever gotten, ha ha ha. Arthur was immediately interested in his future son-in-law words. Oh, then come with me to my studio and let's see that present you mention. Aster took out his communication talisman and said a few words before putting it back on his spatial ring. They went to Arthur's studio and waited a couple of minutes until they heard someone knocking on the door. Arthur opened the door, and to his surprise in front of him the youngest son of the Rain family patriarch was standing outside. BL.net, come in, said Aster, and Kale obeyed. Once the door closed, Kale immediately kneeled in front of Aster. Hi boss and young ladies. Arthur's mind went blank seeing the scene that was developing in front of him. Aster smiled before saying, from now and onwards you will also assist Arya's father. You must treat him with the same respect you show to me. Of course keep all this in secret from other people's eyes. Kale bowed his head. Understood boss. Aster nodded. He turned to see Arthur before saying, this is my gift for you, all the resources available in this planet from the Rain family. Happy birthday, ha ha ha. Chapter 100 Birthday Ceremony, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arthur was in awe. I'm too old for this kind of surprise, but I gladly accept it. Aster nodded and Kale left the room. A guard from the Gale family told Arthur that the last confirmed attendant just arrived, so it was time for the party to start. Even if it was his birthday, as the host, he had to be present to greet all the representatives of the families and forces that came today. Arthur guided Aster and the girls to the main courtyard of the mansion where all the people were already accommodating on their seats. Of course there were some free spots left at the right side of Arthur where normally the great elder Arya as his daughter and some other important people like the first elder would sit. Arya did take her seat next to her father, but when the first elder was about to sit, he felt his body going rigid. He turned his head and saw the kid that sent flying the guards on the main hall last time. Still he tried to ignore Aster, but then he heard Arthur saying, First Elder, please take one of the free seats at my left side. The first elder felt angry. the patriarch was taking the side of some outsider. Traditionally the right side was reserved for the most important members of the family while the left side was for the honored guests. He might have not minded if it was the seat right next to Arthur, but the old man Sebastian was occupying it, so he was going to take the second seat at the left, which he considered a humiliation to his status. He wanted to explode, but remembering what happened last time he calmed down before trying a different approach. Patriarch, according to our tradition only the most important members of the family can sit on the right side. Normally I wouldn't pay too much attention to it, but this is a formal ceremony, so. Before he could finish speaking, Aster interrupted him. There is no need to worry about that. I will have a public, family, bond with Arya in a couple of minutes after all. The first elder felt his blood pressure rising, but he didn't have any other option but to swallow his complaints while Aster sat next to Arya, and he could only sit on the left side since Lilia and Alice took the other two free seats on the right side. The first elder felt humiliated, so he directed a poisonous gaze at Aster while thinking, just wait brat, the Rain family might have almost retreated from this place, but they sent a new elder of the stellar constellation realm. Let's see you acting all high and mighty in front of him later, humph. Now that everyone had an assigned seat, Arthur stood up and used spirit energy to amplify his voice. I, Arthur Gale, humbly greet the distinguished people that had decided to pay a visit to my Gale clan despite the recent chaotic situation we are in, he said while stealing some gazes at Aster. The first act of the party was that each representative presented their gifts for the host. This was a way to also present their families or forces to the other attendants. Normally the one starting should be the Wolfstein family representative, but since the incident with the Golden Reaper, Isaac basically washed his hands of anything related to Galleria. Surprisingly, Wieland Kraft was attending the party as the representative of the Kraft family, and since he was the strongest cultivator present, all the other guests tacitly accorded that he had the right to be the first one to speak. So, the old man stood up to present his gift. The Kraft family wishes the Gale patriarch a long and prosperous life. I hope this little present is to your liking, said the old man before a member from the Kraft family took some steps ahead and presented a little chest with some crystal bottles containing liquids from various colors. Of course, Wieland explained the contents of the bottles so everyone could understand their value. This is a set of spirit elixirs with multiple purposes that are effective for anyone below the star axis realm, from healing to detoxifying and improving the absorption of spirit energy. The details of each elixir are written in the label of each bottle. A guard from the Gale family accepted the gift in Arthur's representation before placing it on top of a platform besides the table where the members of the Gale family were sitting. Arthur stood up. My Gale family appreciates Senior Wieland's consideration. The rest of the guests took their turns to present their gifts. Unlike what Aster had imagined, Egil didn't spoke when it was the turn for the Asher family to speak. Instead it was Eric who did it. Eric Asher wishes the Gale patriarch a long and interesting life. Ha ha ha. Please accept this bottle of monkey wine along with a toast from my Asher family. Egil felt a headache coming his way while the members of the other families laughed. The young master of the Asher family was known for being quite festive, so everyone expected more or less something like this to happen. Even Arthur couldn't help but laugh. He rose his cup and accepted Eric's toast. It's a pleasure. I have heard some good rumors about the rare monkey wine from the Asher family, so I'm glad that later I will be able to try it myself. The same guard took the bottle and placed it carefully next to the gift from the Kraft family. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the Rain family actually had a representative who attended the party, and it was none other than one of Cullis Rain's sons. Although it was the youngest son, it was still a big show of respect considering the situation the Rain family went through a couple of days ago. Kale was thanking all the stars in the firmament that he had now access to the treasure of the Rain family. Originally, he did bring a gift for Arthur since he knew about Aster's relationship with Arya, but it was just a middle mysterious rank treasure to show some respect for his boss. So, when Aster presented Arthur and told him to treat him as if it was his boss, he immediately ordered one of his personal guards to go and bring a better gift with the excuse of not letting others despise the resources of our Rain family. Kale stood up before taking out a large black case from his spatial ring, which one of his guards took and opened it to show a black spear. Kale Rain wishes the Gale patriarch a long and wealthy life. I heard you use a spear as your main weapon, so I hope you like this present. The Night Piercer is a peak mysterious ranked spear. At first the other representatives were in shock. Sky rank treasures were really rare in the Radia star cluster, so every medium-sized force at best had a peak mysterious rank treasure, which were not cheap by any means. Even the worst would have a price of 100,000 spirit stones. As for the spear presented by Kale, the price was about 150,000 spirit stones, so it was quite a generous gift. But then all of the families remembered that the eldest son of Culus Rain was obsessed with the young miss of the Gale family, so they thought that since Cray couldn't attend the party, he sent this gift for her father as an apology. No one could have imagined that Kale was doing this to win Astor's favor, well, no one except Astor, of course. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the gift he was planning to give on the first place, but I guess this will give Uncle Arthur more presents on the Gale family, so I recognize it was a good idea, he thought. The rest of the guests were members of low and medium-ranked forces, so their presents were not at the same level of the big four families, although there were some interesting things like new kinds of ores or spirit herbs discovered in unexplored planetoids or little secret realms. Once the presentations finished, it was the moment for what everyone was waiting for, the tournament between the younger generation. Of course everyone noticed that there were some unknown people sat at the right side of Arthur. They paid special attention to Astor since he was happily speaking with Arya. Before, when Astor spoke with the first elder, he did it in a low voice, so no one paid attention to them earlier. One of the representatives of a medium-sized force decided to speak what was in everyone's mind. Excuse my curiosity, Gale Patriarch, but could you please present the little friend sitting beside your daughter? Astor smiled before he stopped Arthur from presenting him. He stood up and directly looked at everyone before saying, "My surname is Drage Ann. I'm Arya's boyfriend." An uncomfortable silence fell into the whole courtyard until a lot of teenage boys stood from their seats. They all walked until they were in front of their respective forces. Surprisingly, there was even one from the Kraft family, but the first one to say anything was one guy from the Asher family who looked a lot like Eric. "I can't accept those words of yours without seeing how strong you are. Iebi Asher from the Asher family ask for a friendly match to this young brother. Do you accept?" Astor saw Eggle's exasperated expression and he knew that he probably already told the truth to Ebby, and he still asked for a fight, which showed him how stubborn was Eric's older brother. Astor turned to see Arthur before asking, "Uncle Arthur, you don't mind a little friendly tournament, do you?" Arthur internally sighed. "When have you ever worried about my opinions, you brat?" he thought, but he still nodded. "As long as everyone agrees, then I don't see any problem with the young generation learning from each other." Wieland saw the youngster in front of him and he nodded. "The Kraft family agrees." Eggle shook his head. "This pair of brothers are a headache," he thought. "The Asher family agrees." Kale of course couldn't go against Astor's proposition. "The Rain family agrees." And so, everyone gave some space for all the participants of the improvised tournament that was about to start.